Brother and lads, welcome back to Cossy's Arsenal podcast. My name is Cossy. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in all parts of the world. Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to a brand new video. We are diving into the defensive midfield options that Arsenal can have and sign this summer. Now we are only left with 1.5 weeks or roughly 2 weeks to the end of this summer, and that is why I think it is very hard to sign a new player for any club, not just Arsenal, at the moment. Either you're going to have to pay a lot of money or you're going to have to make a couple of bids that are going to be rejected. So we're going to be diving into my 5 options that Arsenal should sign, players that can play in that Thomas Partey role. He has not really started off very well this season, and in my opinion, the fact that Partey has not really started very well is an advantage to Arsenal, because the opening games that we've had, Leicester City, Bournemouth, and Crystal Palace, those are games you can win with your defensive midfielder having a very poor game. But as we dive deeper into the season, you will need Thomas Partey at his best, and you will need your defensive midfielder to be one of the best performers in the team. So when Thomas Partey picks up an injury, it seems like Arsenal's offensive part of the game is highly crippled, but the defensive part of the game is even worse. Last campaign, we conceded more goals with Thomas Partey out of the team, and we scored less with Thomas Partey out of the team. So that means and highlights the crucial role that Thomas Partey plays in this Arsenal side. Whenever we go forward, his role, his engine in that box-to-box role is absolutely key. And when we are defending, the fact that he drops into that back line, and the fact that he's one of those very few defensive midfielders with a very high success rate when it comes to tackles and winning his duels, you need him. We desperately need him. So in a recent video, I asked you which defensive midfielder would you sign to assist Thomas Partey in that defensive midfield role, and you guys voted. And we are going to be running through the 5 options that you actually did go for. Now, there are so many of your suggestions in the comment section, but I've decided to go for 5 of the most selected one, but also signings that I feel are a little bit doable and possible. So literally there is no reason for us to go for Casemiro, because 80 million pounds and trying to give him 200,000 pounds per week, that is not Arsenal, and at the moment we definitely do not need Casemiro, if I'm right. So in number 1, I've gone with Wilfred Ndidi. Now Wilfred Ndidi in the comment section was suggested 4 times, and I'm going to say anyone who suggested Wilfred Ndidi in that defensive midfield role is an absolute genius, and you know football, because in the Premier League, however much we love Thomas Partey, N'Golo Conte, Rodri, and Fabinho, when fit, there is no player in a defensive midfield position that has given us more successful tackles, more duels won than Wilfred Ndidi. And he was an absolute genius in that game that they played against Arsenal. Yes, we demolished them. We played an absolute miracle in that game. I think we were absolutely floating on fire. But the truth is, Wilfred Ndidi had a very, very good game. His average rating in that game on SofaScore was 7.9, and I think if you put it into context, the rest of the Leicester City game was absolute shit. It was only Wilfred Ndidi that had a very, very good game. But apart from that, Wilfred Ndidi is 25 years of age, and his height is around 8.2 meters tall. That literally means that you're looking at a player that is going to win you as many aerial duels as you can, and also looking at a player that has that physical presence and physical command in the midfield. So why I want Wilfred Ndidi to replace Thomas Partey is the age bracket. You're looking at someone who's 25, so he has a lot more, a lot of time, a lot of years ahead of his career than Thomas Partey. Partey is 29. I think in the next 2 years, Partey will be gassed out. Given the key role he's playing in the Arsenal side, he will be over. It will be over for Thomas Partey by 2025. So that is where Wilfred Ndidi comes in. His career is only starting. The problem is injuries. We've talked about that. Probably our physio team can deal better with Wilfred Ndidi's injuries. I don't know if that is an option, but if anyone can get Wilfred Ndidi to play consistently He's one of the best defensive midfielders in the Premier League currently. The other problem I have with Wilfred Ndidi is, of course, the AFCON. Thomas Partey is likely to feature in every edition of the of AFCON with Ghana, and Wilfred Ndidi with Nigeria, the similar story. So the problem with Wilfred Ndidi is he leaves for AFCON just when Thomas Partey leaves. That is something I'm not really well versed with, and I don't think many Arsenal fans will actually be very okay for three of our central midfielders and defensive midfielders to leave for AFCON. Mohamed El-Neni for Egypt, Thomas Partey for Ghana, and then you have a backup in Wilfred Ndidi leaving for Nigeria as well. So it doesn't really paint the whole picture of a backup and then someone who sits in there when Thomas Partey is not available. And that's why in number 2 I've gone with Moises Caicedo, Colombia. I think with Caicedo, the limitations of the AFCON do not actually matter. He plays for Colombia, so you only miss him when he's in the World Cup. I don't think there is a World Cup edition that breaks the Premier League. I've never seen it. It will never happen. Apart from the Qatari World Cup. And the advantages of such editions is that the Premier League will be halted, so you do not miss Moises Caicedo. Brighton will not miss Moises Caicedo this World Cup because the Premier League will be halted. Now, the advantages of signing Moises Caicedo are pretty enormous, but not more than those of Wilfred Ndidi. I think Moises Caicedo, playing for Brighton at the moment, is only a starter in the Premier League. He is not really used to the environment, life, and landscape in the Premier League like Wilfred Ndidi, but he's also 23. We never know where his career is actually going to end up at. They've signed him from Independiente. It's a very, very good deal for Brighton, and I'm very, very sure they will not sell him this summer, but come next January, come next summer, they will be thinking, if anyone has the right amount of money, we'll be selling Caicedo to you. Now, he comes in as a direct replacement of Yves Bissouma, and that is exactly the same role we want him to do at Arsenal Football Club. Bissouma was Brighton's best midfielder by far, in my opinion. Recoveries and also carrying that ball into the final third. That is exactly what Thomas Partey is doing at Arsenal Football Club. So, in my opinion, this window, this summer, quite a difficult one, but if you get Brighton £50 million, they would accept that. In my opinion, they would accept. Yes, I know Graham Potter will tell the board, you cannot sell 2 of my best defensive midfielders in the same window. But this is Brighton and this is money. Of course, we've already signed Ben White from there. So the relationship between us and Brighton is not that bad. We can talk to them and Caicedo will be our player. One of the very important players at Brighton, his tackle success rate is also very, very late. And also the rate at which he's winning duels. 10 games for them already, but he's becoming one of the most important midfielders at Brighton. In my opinion, anyone who wants Moises Caicedo should wait for another season to see how he develops at Brighton, how he gets on, how he gets on with the rest of his teammates, and then you can make a bid. But Caicedo, for me, Partey, Caicedo, on the bench, that is. I don't think there is anything that gets close to that in terms of quality. But if you cannot get Moises Caicedo, how about trying Edson Alvarez? Now, none of you has suggested Edson Alvarez at Ajax, but I just did. And this is kind of hacking the results, but I just had to. Now, instead of all the names that you've suggested, I've decided to go for Edson Alvarez, and this is the reason. Now, he's a well-coached player. He's been playing in a well-coached Ajax side under Erik ten Hag, and the role that we want him to play in that single midfield pivot, that is what he's been doing for Ajax throughout the 38 games of... Are they 38? I don't know how... I really don't know how many teams are in the Dutch Eredivisie, but I would say the whole season... Last campaign, that is where Edson Alvarez played, and for me, he was the best midfielder, defensive midfielder down there in the Dutch Eredivisie. Now, of course, I talked about Sangare in July, and I said Arsenal should sign Sangare, and the reason why I went for Sangare is because Edson Alvarez could be another difficult one to sign. Yes, Ajax have sold a couple of players, and they're renowned for their record of selling players. Edson Alvarez, if there is a slight chance, if there is a slight window in which we can sign him, definitely go for him. I don't think Ajax are going to ask for anything in excess of 35 million euros or pounds. So I think 35 million pounds for Edson Alvarez is absolutely very, very good. I think he plays for Argentina. Literally, that means that when Thomas Partey goes out for AFCON, Edson Alvarez is there. The question is if you can sign a player in the caliber and quality of Edson Alvarez just to sit on the bench to wait for Thomas Partey to pick up an injury or to go to AFCON, or just Thomas Partey to suffer burnout. I think he's a quality player. He wants guaranteed minutes, and any club that is looking for a number 6, especially Man United, I'm really surprised. I'm very, very shocked to the fact that they have not thought about Edson Alvarez. Ajax will be trying to keep him because they have lost Ryan Gravenberch in that area of the midfield. So losing Ryan Gravenberch, one of your best central midfielders, you don't want to lose a defensive midfielder in Edson Alvarez. And also the fact that they've lost Lisandro Martinez, who can play directly in that defensive midfield role, means they will try to hold on to Edson Alvarez as much as possible. But I think the powers and abilities of Edson Alvarez are not in tackling and winning success rates. They're about holding the ball. Mikel Arteta, talk to me. If you wanted to sign a midfielder, do you want one that is going to fight for the ball all the time, or you want one that's going to help your team keep the ball all the time? I think it is on the contrary, just like Rodri is doing at Manchester City. Those kinds of midfielders are better at keeping the ball, holding onto it, and just maintaining spells of possession rather than losing the ball and winning it back. So in my opinion, Edson Alvarez is very fit for the role. I think he's one that I would even consider dropping Thomas Partey if Partey doesn't step up his performances in the upcoming game. So Thomas Partey starts, Edson Alvarez on the bench, but within a very short period of time, I think it would be Alvarez starting and Thomas Partey backing up. I hope I'm right about that. Number 4, I've gone with Douglas Luiz. Lots of you selected Douglas Luiz in the comment section below, and I thought that was a nice pick. A player who's played in the Premier League. He's played for Aston Villa, and I think when you think about Jorginho, think about Douglas Luiz. Actually, if I'm a Chelsea fan, if I'm handling transfers at Chelsea and I'm a big fan of Jorginho, I'm thinking, how do I replace Jorginho? The one name that I would definitely go for is Douglas Luiz. Now, his contract runs down in 2023. Aston Villa have already signed Boubakary Kamara. I told you, someone should sign Boubakary Kamara until Aston Villa did. So, they've signed Boubakary Kamara. It looks like Steven Gerrard is not well versed with what players like Douglas Luiz provide to the team. He's more concerned with a defensive midfielder who loves the tackle, who loves the rough kind of work, rather than holding the ball and passing it all day. Douglas Luiz for me fits the Arsenal profile very well. He's only 25 years of age, and he's one player that if he comes into this Arsenal side, is only going to cost us a little amount of money, probably 10, probably 15 million euros, and you're getting yourself a guaranteed player that will be there even when Thomas Partey is not. He's not injury prone. One thing I love about him, the fact that he was dropped from that Aston Villa side doesn't really matter to me. I think the manager there at Aston Villa really doesn't understand him. And I think with Douglas Luiz, it's the same with Jorginho, it's the same with Sergio Busquets. You just need to be at a side with a manager that understands you. You need to be, in a system that favors you. I do not think the football at Aston Villa really favors Douglas Luiz. So that's why I've gone with Douglas Luiz. Very young. He's going to be available on a free next summer. So you can easily grab him and take him at Arsenal at a very cheap price. He was linked with Milan before, linked with a couple of other clubs, even in France. But before he goes there, how about Arsenal trying to hijack the deal? And finally, the other deal we should hijack in terms of a defensive midfielder is Leandro Paredes. Now, I thought about Idrissa Gueye from PSG, but I think Idrissa Gueye's fate is kind of sealed. He's going to be is going to be joining Everton. Now, Gueye and Paredes are not that young. Gueye is 30, but I would definitely love him. I would definitely want to sign it because I just have this kind of feeling that if you have a player like Idris Gueye, you have security. In my opinion, you have security. Played at the top level at PSG, you want him. You definitely want him. But it's going to go back to Everton. And I think that's a good signing by Everton. Him and Onana, plus Doucouré, plus Townsend, plus Gray. That is quality. That is quality that can keep you sailing above relegation. So I've gone with Leandro Paredes, linked with a couple of clubs, including Juventus, Chelsea, Man United. And why Arsenal cannot try to do this? 29 years of age, he's not going to be disturbed by AFCON, first and foremost, but also is one player that brings a lot of pedigree. I think he himself is absolute pedigree. Arsenal needs someone like that. We are looking at bringing in players that do have more minutes and more experience under the belt than bringing in younger players. Of course, in terms of bringing in young players, we already have Edson Alvarez playing in that role. So Leandro Paredes would be one that just directly competes with Thomas Partey and allows Edson Alvarez more minutes to develop as a younger player, probably in the Europa League and also in other competitions, FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. So those are my that is my 5 pick that I would think if Arsenal are thinking about easy deals, doable deals for defensive central midfielders, I think those ones would work. I mean, in the comment section, if you agree with me, let me know. If you disagree with me, let me know. But of course, I'll also do the same for wingers that we can sign. And definitely, most definitely, I will be ranking these players that we are linked with very, very shortly.